on navigating new realities in teaching and learning. The esteemed panel comprises of Dr. Asha Kaul, Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad. Dr. Asha Kaul is Professor, Communications Area at the Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad. She is also founding chairperson of Gender Resource Center at IIM. Professor Kaul has authored 8 books on various subjects in business communication and corporate reputation. She has been named among the 50 Indian management thinkers who had made an impact on the theory of management and practice in 2015. Next on the panel, we have Ms. Tamara Cunningham, Assistant Vice President for Global Initiatives and Confucius Institute, American Director, New Jersey City University. Ms. Cunningham has been a leader in higher education for 20 years and has held instrumental roles in both academic and student affairs. She is currently the Assistant Vice President for Global Initiatives at NJCU, where she oversees the Institute's strategic internationalization plan. She is also the American Director of the Confucius Institute at NJCU and works closely with the Chinese government for further cultivating Sino-US relations. Next on the panel, we have Ms. Priyanka Agarwal, founder and CEO, Connect to Teach. With a bachelor's degree from Northwestern University and an MBA from Cambridge University's Judge Business School, Ms. Agarwal is an associate fellow, Royal Commonwealth Society, and a fellow of the RSA, Royal Society for Encouragement of Arts, Manufacture and Commerce. She is the founder and CEO of Connect to Teach, an edtech platform that brings the brightest and the most motivated minds worldwide together to educate the future generation. On the panel, we also have Mr. Mohit Patel, founder of the Northstar School. Mr. Mohit is an educator, engineer, and entrepreneur who strives to create engaging and insightful learning experience. Mr. Patel has a master's degree from the University of Cambridge and another master's degree from Harvard University. He is the founder of the Northstar School, Rajkot, which is one of the leading innovation hubs in education. On the panel, we also have Professor Dharmesh Shah, Registrar, GLS University. Dr. Dharmesh Shah is Registrar and Professor of Finance at GLS University, Ahmedabad. He has a PhD in the area of corporate governance. He is also a member of various reputed organizations like Institute of Company Secretaries of India, Gujarat and North Gujarat University's Commerce and Management Teachers Association, and Gujarat University Accountancy Teachers Association. The panel will be moderated by Professor Avani Desai, Dean, Faculty of Business Administration, GLS University. Dr. Desai has over 20 years of corporate and academic experience. She holds an MBA in finance and a PhD in the area of investor relations. She works as a professor and dean, business administration at GLS University and as a visiting faculty at Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad, MICA, and Entrepreneurship Development Institute of India. She is the chairperson of GLS University's Women's Development Cell and the managing editor of GLS Voice. It is my personal privilege to welcome all the distinguished panelists once again, and I request Professor Avani Desai to take it further.
Very good morning, our President, Dr. Sudhir Nanavati, our esteemed panelists, and all the faculty members who have shown great initiative by being a part of this week-long faculty development program. Inarguably, education is one of the sectors that has been worst hit by COVID. A survey by UNICEF, UNESCO, and the World Bank have thrown up shocking figures. It's estimated that there are going to be learning losses to the extent of $10 trillion in terms of reduction in lifetime earnings for the students who are currently students. It's very evident that after the break in the form of lockdowns all over the world, the classrooms that the students are entering are not the same that they left a few months back. There has been a drastic transformation in the classroom itself. In March 2020, when the world was hit suddenly by a pandemic of this magnitude, the initial reaction was a knee-jerk reaction. That was more of an urgent recalibration. Professors all over the world were scrambling to move from physical to online. Systems were not in place. And it was not the best experience that one would have hoped for. However, over the summer break, there has been an opportunity to reimagine learning and to modernize our education systems truly so that we are prepared for the 21st century in terms of education. On this note, I welcome all my panelists, and I'd like to pose a question to which I'd like answers from each of the panelists in turn. Ms. Cunningham, I'd like to start with you. What is the one overwhelming challenge to education that you feel has occurred due to the COVID situation and will prevail in the post-COVID situation?
Thank you so much, Avani, for this wonderful invitation and for your question. Um, for us specifically in the United States, but also I think globally, what COVID has done is further underscored the economic divide and therefore the digital divide. I think it speaks to the access to education or limited access to education for students in vulnerable populations and in communities and systems where they don't have access to technologies that they need in order to be successful in the classroom. And I think that this particular piece is really important to address because without the digital or technological piece for these students, right? And I'm not just talking about physical infrastructure, I'm also talking about the opportunity for them to learn about new technologies and that sort of thing. Without this piece, I think that it is very difficult for them to be successful in a virtual space. And so I think it's more of a challenge for educators to, if it's sort of like a math problem, for example, that we're solving for X, right? We're solving for digital inclusion for students who don't have access in that way. If they don't have access in their homes to laptops or Wi-Fi or access to the technologies that they need, then for sure they will not be successful in the classroom.
Absolutely.
And so I think that we'll talk a little bit later about ways in which we can address this digital divide and ways that we can be more digitally inclusive to ensure that students are successful in this new normal.
Thank you, Ms. Cunningham. Professor Dharmesh Shah, I'd like your take on this. What, according to you, is the one most overwhelming challenge?
Yeah, very good morning to respected Sudhin Anavati sir and all my panelists, all my colleagues. First of all, before I give the answers of your questions, my best compliment to Dean Dr. Avani Desai and the entire Faculty of Business Administration to take this topic as is a very apt topic, and on the base of this topic, you are arranging a FDP. That is going to be a great compliments from GLS University side. The questions, what you ask about it, that is, if I want to give one overwhelming challenge, then I can say to invest in new models and technology of teacher preparations, training and development during COVID and post-COVID situations. Although most universities and educational institutes are recognize the importance of great teachers, but still teacher preparations, training, development is a major challenge in COVID and post-COVID situations. We can know about it in the month of March when this pandemic arose in the entire country of India. We, many of the university faced a major problem how to conduct the classes, how to give the education to the students. And that is all not possible because our teachers are not properly trained. They are not actually are used to or accustomed with the system of online teaching. So we can say the major overwhelming challenge is to train the teacher, to develop the teacher, and to give the best from the teachers to the students. And I'm sure this FDP is a humble attempt by the GLS University to address this challenge and find some amicable outcome for teaching, fraternity, as well as university and education institutes. Through this FDP, we can get the great learning to how to train the teachers. That's my
Thank you, Professor Shah. Mr. Patel, you straddle the school side of education as well as the university side. So it'll be very interesting to hear what you consider the most daunting challenge to education.
Yeah. So I think three things have for us, school and university level both. One, two of them were already addressed. One is digital equity. Uh,
Yes.
just assuming that people have devices and bandwidth to participate in online classes and online resources is not correct, and we need to compensate for that. The second is of course the pedagogical approaches. So I'm kind of much kinder to teachers. I think they have done an incredible job in shifting so quickly to online models that we have to just appreciate how quickly they moved. But of course there is room for improvement. The models are emerging. This is a new way of teaching, and really we are all figuring out what's the best way to deal with these situations going forward as well. And the third thing that was kind of a surprise to me is digital fluency. A lot of times we assume that students or even teachers are aware of basic digital skills, which we really need to focus on. It might not be so obvious to others on how to maintain their privacy, how to make the best use of resources available while taking care of their mental and physical health as well. So these are the three things that we've been working on, and they will stay for a very long time, even after the schools and universities start. This hybrid model is here to stay, and these skills and approaches are going to be required for a very long time.
Thank you, Mr. Patel. I think all the last point about digital fluency is something that not many people have yet begun to think of, and it's very pertinent that you raise that issue. I'd like to move on to Ms. Priyanka Agarwal. Ms. Agarwal, you are sort of the end consumer of education, in the sense that you not only recruit, being from industry, not only you recruit students who have passed out, but you also work in the ed tech sector itself. I'm sure you've seen the evolution of education and technology. And therefore, I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on the most overwhelming challenge.
Hi, Avani. First of all, thank you for having me as part of the panel. I think COVID has brought out a lot of overwhelming challenges, like people mentioned, like, bridging the digital gap, digital literacy. We're seeing challenges in parents' participation in home schooling, broadband, mental health of students, creating interactive content, internet bandwidth. But I think there's one issue that hasn't received enough attention, and I think that's the issue that's really important for India right now, is availability of education material in vernacular languages. I think even if we bridge the digital divide, we get internet bandwidth, if we can't actually communicate to the students in the language they understand best and they're comfortable in, a lot of work will be lost in translation, literally. Given that, the vernacular internet users in India, for example, are going to exceed English-speaking users by 300 million by next year. That's a huge number to look at. But again, we have so many regional languages in India that it's not as easy as just looking at that number to solve that problem. And I think a lot of innovation, a lot of technology, whether it is predictive analytics, linguistics, whether it's a use of big data, all of that will need to be used to actually bridge this gap. And I think it's a big priority for Google and Microsoft from both a business perspective and increasing user perspective to actually reach the next mile of customers. But also you'll start seeing a lot of innovation happening in the startup circles to bridge this vernacular gap. Mobile phone will play a huge role because we already have vernacular keyboards. Nobody's going to desktop and laptops to then access education. So I think mobile phones in India will play a huge role in actually helping bridge that gap. But I definitely think for India, this is a really, really important shortcoming that we need to look at and solve for.
Yeah, absolutely, Ms. Agarwal. In fact, a few state governments have started efforts. I know for sure that the Madhya Pradesh government has taken up a massive project to convert a lot of its primary school content to the Gond language, which is spoken by a majority of people in the state. So moving on, I'd like to pose a question to Professor Asha Kaul. Ma'am, experts say that the first step in designing an effective online learning system is to define the optimal remote
Avani,
learning.
before we go on to that, I'd also like to talk about the challenge that we've been facing. So can I just quickly take that challenge? Because some of the questions, the responses that have come, and I'm in total agreement. But I think what is more challenging than anything else is for the teachers, how do you unlearn and then relearn? That I think is more critical, and that has not been addressed because you're talking about a lot of logistical issues. But where I'm coming from is, like if I have a case and I take it to class, and the way in which I teach it, now what I need to do is I need to unlearn the entire process. And that's a huge, huge challenge because now I need to relearn as to how I need to take it to class. And there's also a challenge that the students have been facing because, when there's a huge class and there are a lot of students in class, one doesn't read and come, it's all right. You don't get caught. But the students also seem to be facing a challenge because now they have to be 100% prepared. I can see everyone, directly eye to eye. So it's not only a question at the front with the teachers, but it's also a challenge that is being faced by the students. And I think we need to cognize that and we need to reshape our assignments in such a way so that we're able to get the best out of the students. Thanks, Avani.
Thank you so much, Professor Kaul. I think the student's perspective is so important to keep in mind because it's important that they do not get frustrated by the entire process and their motivation stays intact.
Sure.
So moving on, I would again continue to be with Professor Kaul, and I'd like to know from you, ma'am, how did you at IIM Ahmedabad go about moving from physical to an online or hybrid system, especially in terms of planning your learning objectives, adhering to them, and deciding between the synchronous and asynchronous modes of delivery?
Thanks, Avani. That's a brilliant question. So, at IIMA, we've been doing these synchronous programs with a lot of service providers. So like we had Hughes and we had Geo and we have a lot of those platforms. So it's not something new for us. But what is new is, the pedagogy, the change in pedagogy for a compact group. So when I was talking about, us doing those programs, there would be probably 130, 180 students and they would be attending the class. But now what is happening is what you're trying to do is you're trying to shift a class which is used to face-to-face interaction. You're trying to shift it to this online mode. So I would say, Avani, the learning objectives don't change. They can't change, right? What really changes is the pedagogy as to how you deliver that. So a lot of resources, a lot of planning, a lot of thinking through it is required, which probably we were not doing earlier. Because we've been used to going to class and taking the classes, and that's one of the reasons why I said we have to unlearn a lot of things. Yes. And then we need to ramp up the way in which we are going ahead. I would say the biggest challenge for us is students are better equipped at handling anything which is digital than us. So one thing which I do is I go to class and I say, in case I goof up when I'm trying to open the breakout session or the poll, you must, excuse me, age is on my side. So the students know that, they would be better equipped at it. So there are times when I fumble in class and they'll say, ma'am, left-hand corner, right-hand corner, top-hand corner. So, then it's easy for me to navigate. So otherwise, the thinking of how are you going to do it to make it more interactive is what creates a bit of a challenge.
Right. Thank you so much, Professor Kaul. Mr. Patel, I'll come next to you now because we've spoken about learning objectives. And as Professor Kaul says, learning objectives do not change, right? However, a lot of teachers are mistakenly now equating online delivery with online learning. And as a person who's known for designing learning experiences based on learning theories and cognitive neuroscience, how would you say that we need to move our focus to learning and not just technological tools to make our teaching learning process better?
All right. So that's something that we've struggled with our teachers, and it's kind of a systemic problem in the way that technology companies present themselves as the answer to global problems all the time, as if they are the solution to every problem imaginable. And a lot of students and teachers buy into it, that only if I have Zoom unlimited minutes, my class will be great.
Right.
Only if I had no subscription to this thing, my class would be great. And eventually we come to realize that tools are not really as important as the experience that they are affording, and the experience that technology. So my fundamental belief is that technology, only technology mediated learning is really impoverished. It's really not comparable to what we can have, the kind of situated experience, the kind of connected experience that we have in class. So having that at the back of the mind, we try to salvage the situation with some affordances that technology can provide. If teachers keep that in mind, that right, I'm not comparing what I could have done in class with what I can do with technology. It's just that this is not the ideal situation. Now, what affordances can a platform provide to me, and how do I use that? A lot of times teachers and also school or university managements keep on trying new platforms or new tools, new technologies, because anything shiny is always exciting,
True.
and that has a really steep learning curve, right? Not only for teachers, but also for students, and also for the systems that you design around it. So my suggestion is really to stick to any tool, any platform that you like, and anything new is also going to come with its own issues. So whatever you have, use that, and try and think that pedagogy and relationships are always above technology. And what we need to understand as learning science is that learning is really a social process, and technology is really the way technology is kind of used right now in a situation like this is really not bringing us together in the sense that a class or a school or a campus experience can.
Right.
So we need to try and build those social experiences as far as we can, as much as we can, into technology mediated learning, and that would involve having days where you don't discuss about learning and class, but have informal programs. You ask kids and students to meet on their own
Right.
without a
Right.
in a safe way possible, without a teacher involved. But trying to building these social experiences is key. Without that, we know learning can't happen, and it's really it's very hard to get that across over and over again. It's a really old science, it's not new, that learning is really a social process, and we need to build that into the tools themselves.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. And I strongly believe that universities and schools are much more than places of learning. They're the centers of communities. They play critical roles in creating relationships that not only last a lifetime, and which people can look back on fondly or use on a more practical note as their professional networks, but they are actually the foundation of higher education. In fact, what you mentioned, Mr. Patel, about having uh, to come out with some way to facilitate interaction between students is something that a lot of US universities are doing now. They're using this system called pods,
Yeah.
where students in smaller groups are being encouraged to interact within those pods and get some semblance of social satisfaction, which otherwise they're missing out. Ms. Cunningham, I'd like to ask you, what are some of the interventions that NJCU is using to ensure that teacher-student and student-student relationships are built in these trying times?
Sure, good question. And I had to laugh at Professor Kaul's response when she said that, teachers need to unlearn and then relearn. It's almost like teachers at the beginning, they're entering into this flipped classroom where the generation of students is teaching them about the technology first, and then the learning can begin, right?
Right.
And so I think prior to COVID, you know, we were so adamant about having our personal spaces, our personal business, our personal lives, even down to our cell phone devices, right? For the students, leave it out of the classroom. And now we are in the students' personal spaces. So we're asking them to please invite us now into your space. And I think we need to think about how we do that, right? We want to maybe model after these social media spaces like Facebook and Instagram. They do a wonderful job at building community and family. I mean, some posts even say, hello to my Facebook family, right? And so if professors would engage in the classroom in that way, and that's some of the things that we're doing with teacher faculty development, is teaching our faculty how to engage the students in this new reality. Make it a very social space for them where they're able to engage and share them more of themselves, both inside and outside of the classroom, and allow for the flexibility of that space. We find that when we do that with students, when we allow them to open up and we allow them to engage and talk about themselves, which students love to do, then the learning, they can be open up more to the learning, right, of the content and the pedagogical pieces that they need to understand for the actual course. And so we've been doing pods, we've been doing social spaces and hashtags and putting them all over our social media. We've asked our students to begin their own social media pages that speak to this virtual learning spaces. So these are the ways in which we're engaging them and allowing them to bring us into their space and allowing them to be open enough to share their spaces with us.
That's amazing. I think all of us can take a few pointers. And I absolutely agree with what you said at the beginning. In fact, our students were actually making memes on this, you know, saying that the college did not allow mobile phones, and now they want us to even take exams on mobile phones, and what a flip it has been, right? Professor Dharmesh, I'd come to you with a question now, since you work as the registrar of a very large university. I'd like to ask you something about the value chain of education. We have spoken about the classroom and we've spoken about social interaction. But from a university management perspective, you need to address the entire value chain, which is not only about delivery of content and student understanding and relationships, but it moves on to assessment, the all important function of a university management, and then feedback, and then completing the loop back to student instruction. So while we've spoken a lot about the classroom and social interaction, what is your take on how the assessment part of the value chain and the feedback part of the value chain can be addressed, and how are you doing it?
A very relevant questions from the university perspective. I just want to tell you a basic about first hybrid learning. Hybrid learning is a way of, I'm sure you are hearing me. Hybrid learning is a way of combining traditional classrooms experiential learning objective, and digital course delivery that emphasize using the best option for each learning objective. When you're talking about to implement in university sites, I'm just giving you a few ideas what we already implemented in our GLS University. And the first idea that is the most important in GLS University when we talk about it, or in any university when we talk about it, the teacher dedications. When you talk about teacher dedications, today you agree with me, with Wi-Fi hotspots and routers temporarily replacing the brick and mortar walls, and teachers and students still need to connect, engage in exciting learning opportunity, strengthen and build skills, and explore and personalize learning with project-based activity. So what you talk about the assessment part, or what you talk about to delivery part, I'm suggesting in that way, the teacher dedications towards student is one of the major key in any university for a delivery, or for a new concept, or for explorations, for a discussions that we are talking about. And that's why I told you in my first, when you asked the questions about the overwhelming challenge, I told you about teacher development. Here my first take in a university, teacher dedications. Second, I can say about it, we can approach it, we can adopt a new approaches where we can make a learning dynamic. Like we can say about it, education technologies and e-learnings are not like new sources for education sectors which was not available earlier. It was available earlier, but now the usage of that models, now usage of that technology is going to be highest at this particular point of time when we can talk about it. When we talk about models using also, we have a many, like whatever the Asa madam told about it, rightly told about it, the unlearn and relearn. So that's the things we have to also adopt when we are adopting any models. Like suppose right now we are using a Zoom for this panel discussions. So there's any technological tools when we are using, we have to adopt, think about what the benefit is going to be there, what are the association is going to be there, and then accordingly we have to use that particular model. And I always suggest to my all teachers, whatever the models are going to be used, you have to experiment first that model from your own with colleagues or maybe some educator supporters. You can explore that model first, you can explore that tools first, and then you can use for the students perspective. And the last but the most important, which I'm telling you, in hybrid learning, engage in co-teaching team approaches. That is going to be a most suitable way in universities, we can say. If only one teacher can engage the classes, it may happen the students cannot connect with, all students cannot connect with the one teachers. It may happen you can do a co-teaching, and that co-teaching method is going to be used very well in universities, where the two teachers or maybe two colleagues can join together and take one class and use or make a team and do the classes.
I think
And
that would be an ideal scenario,
yeah,
and
ideal
I
scenario.
absolutely agree with
Yeah.
you. And as Professor Shah has already raised, the topic of tools and various ideas, and of course, one has to make do with what one has and not get bedazzled by the sales pitch of various technology companies, as Mr. Patel said. Ms. Agarwal, I'd like to ask you, since you come from an edtech background, while most of us do acknowledge that just Zoom isn't e-learning, a lot of us are quite clueless about the areas of innovation that will trend in the near future, and it will help us create more effective learning experiences, not just in the present in terms of more effective learning experiences, but also something that would help us translate into real marketable skills for our students, so that when they go out into the job market, uh, they are able to successfully obtain employment. So what are some of these innovations that you see coming in the near future?
Thanks, Avani. I think when you had first sent me this question, you had, what are the technologies that are trending? And I asked you, can I speak about innovations that will be trending instead? And one of the reasons to do that was I think there's a lot of inspiration to take from sectors like retail, healthcare, government, where they've done a lot of work with technology to sort of reach everybody, keep everyone engaged, deliver a lot of customer support through technology. And they've used small innovations to do that, whether it is omni-channel marketing, whether it was, click to a shop where you buy online and you go pick up stuff offline and sort of interact with the users that way. And I think a lot of those innovations will filter into the education sector also. And a lot of innovation will come in to support students in the smallest of ways, which will have huge effects. I think some categories which will be really important in which we'll see innovations will be, for example, student support. So, for example, how do we ensure that the student is actually learning? So more frequent assessments will happen, more frequent interventions will happen to bridge the learning gaps, which will require technology to assist the teacher. It's not possible for one teacher to then look at assessments every week for every student in the classroom. And so technology plays a huge role here in like, how do we assess faster? How do we help bridge that gap faster? Students are lagging behind. The second is student engagement, because the minute you're delivering something online, it's not hybrid yet in a lot of places. It's still quite online. There's a huge, the relationship breaks, what everyone spoke about, that social relationship breaks, and there's a higher chance of drop-offs, which is what we don't want. And so that student engagement becomes really important. How do I feel that if I do this, I'll actually gain success? So that success could be, will I actually get a job? Will I actually learn the skill and be able to apply it? Will I actually be able to, you know, showcase it to somebody and show off what I know? So whatever the success looks like to you. And that engagement could come through technology in different ways, like making it more easy to access the industry in terms of experts to reach out to, network with. It could come in ways where it could be about like virtual learning or simulations to actually understand the concept more, its applications more. The third part will be student data and security. And I think that is going to start becoming a really crucial aspect because, again, when we're starting to do things online, we're starting to involve technology to bridge a lot of those gaps. You'd be collecting a lot of data on each student, and we still don't have full awareness on what data security should mean to us as individuals, and what data is required to do, you know, for public good. So what we should be doing public good. And I think that we start seeing a lot of innovations there also, whether it is blockchain in education, whether it is cybersecurity, or whether it is, again, big data. And I think those will be some of the places where you'll see innovation. There are a lot of companies doing small things, like, for example, for a student support, a company like Civitas Learning in the US, which is doing a lot of data analytics to support. There are a lot of blockchain companies that are now doing work in the education sector for student certifications and assessing learning skills. So there is stuff happening, but I think that the best innovations will be, which will be really small. It will be like one button out there that will change things on a global level for the students and the community.
Right. Thank you so much, Ms. Agarwal. And I agree, because we're not looking at the next big bang out here, but we actually need solutions that can address each of those small problems that gradually mount and create difficulties in the whole teaching learning process. Professor Kaul, I'd like to come back to you with a question on skill building. A lot of us believe that the online or hybrid model works best for concept-driven courses. I mean, even before COVID-19, we saw a gamut of online courses which were largely concept-driven, you know. But what about courses that need to be taught, which are focused on skill building? As a senior faculty member who teaches several courses that aim to build specific skills among students, what is your take on this?
So, Avani, I'll just take you a wee bit back from today, right? And, you know, COVID has just kind of precipitated our entry into this online mode. But this is the need, this was the need, right? So, you know, even the government had started saying, how do you scale up your programs? Because what was important was that you're supposed to impart training to larger and larger number of students. So, we had started thinking of different ways. So Zoom affordances, you know, they also give us this access to breakout rooms and polls. So I basically teach communication. So there are only two aspects in communication which I'm not able to do. So if I want to do a mobile exercise, for instance, two of my favorite games, one is train, and the other is dancing in the center of the well. These, I think, are the only two exercises which I can't do. But otherwise, you know, I put students in breakout rooms and they are conversing, they're talking to one another. So even if it's a skill development, let's assume I'm using OB and I'm talking about team building, and I give them an exercise to do, they would probably be in a position to discuss it. They may not be physically present to be able to do that exercise, but they can physically discuss that and then they can come up with their responses. So I don't think, you know, this is going to be an impediment, but what we need to be prepared for is, you know, COVID is going to end tomorrow. Are we going to get back to our original teaching, or are we going to make the best out of this time and try scaling up, right? Try scaling it up. So it's a blended learning program where students come to campus, they attend some sessions, but then it's not possible for them to be here all the time. So are we able to deliver it? So whether it's skill development or any other course, it can be done. Of course, there are restrictions. You can't do it another way it could be done. Otherwise, there are restrictions. But if you're doing a blended learning or a hybrid learning mode where when they come over here, you can try out those exercises, but we do need to reinvent Avani. You know, a lot of thinking goes in planning a class. Take a poll.
Absolutely.
take a poll, ask them to get into breakout sessions, discuss, come back. So there's some kind of activity instead of them just sitting over there for 3 hours and listening to you.
Listening to you. Absolutely.
Right.
Having worked with you for several years, Professor Kaul, I've seen your most effective techniques at play. And I absolutely agree with you. It will take some more investment of time and effort before the session itself, but it is doable. It is not that we need to abandon all hope
It's
before we
doable.
enter the virtual classroom.
No. It is absolutely, and it's fun. It's fun.
It's fun.
It's real
Absolutely.
fun, but it is energy consuming. I mean, I think I would consume much more energy if I was doing an online class than probably if I do a class and I do it. So
And I'm sure all our 150 plus participants will agree with you there, right? Ms. Cunningham, you mentioned at the beginning of the session itself the issue of digital inequity. And when you say that, we feel that we're not alone in this, because in the Indian context, this inequity is even more. So I'd like to know, how you as a university extend support to students who might have learning disabilities, who might have economic hardships, or who may have difficult home environments, making it very difficult for them to get online access. How do you as a university reach out and make sure that things are easier for them?
Such a good question, and so important right now. When COVID hit, the first thing that we did was we surveyed the students to see what their needs were technologically, what they had access to at home and what they did not. And in fact, Governor Phil Murphy of New Jersey, you might remember that he visited India actually September of last year. He appropriated a certain amount of money to institutions of higher learning in New Jersey so that we could offer laptops for students. We offered Wi-Fi access and remote access to students. And so this, of course, made it possible for students to have access to technologies that they needed. We dropped them off at their homes. I mean, you could see some of the faculty volunteered their own time to socially distance and drop off laptops to students in their homes. And it was just such a wonderful kind of gesture of not just responsibility, but it showed the students that we really care not just about their learning, but we care about them as individuals, right? In addition to that, the online learning piece and the learning the technologies piece. So our IT department offers these online trainings for students around the clock. Every week, regularly, these trainings are available to students. And we also offered for students who are freshmen and sophomores, so for the 100 and 200 level courses, we do have face-to-face courses for those students, socially distanced, so that, they're getting acclimated to the college life and college way. So those students are allowed to be on the campus. So those are just some of the quick ways, I know we're running out of time, things that we have done to address some of this digital divide.
I think that's absolutely amazing. And if you've been able to bring freshmen and sophomores on campus, I think you're actually implementing the hybrid model successfully, right? We have a lot to learn from you. All said and done, all of us today are, at the end of the day, devoted to learning and to students. And after all, everything that we're talking about is with one stakeholder in mind, and that is the student. So, Mr. Patel, I'd like to come to you with my final question. It's so important for students to feel engaged and motivated, no matter what age they are at. And we're hearing a lot about online fatigue, digital fatigue. We're hearing a lot about 8-year-olds switching off because they're getting tired of listening to their teacher all the time. So what are some of the innovative strategies that you use and you would recommend to maintain engagement and student motivation?
I think of all the problems that we've discussed, this one is the most important, most urgent, and we sometimes fail to understand the incredible psychological damage that our kids, especially the young ones, school kids, are going through right now. We are thinking of it in terms of a health catastrophe, but we're not talking about the mental fatigue and the mental psychological almost trauma because I get calls from students, like young ones who are very close to me, like, please call us back to school, please call us back to school. And and we have to understand that the kind of lockdowns that we've had in India have been some of the most stringent across the world.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
And that has created not only the learning losses in terms of future earnings that you're talking about. I'm not even going there. I'm just talking about their childhood traumas that we are building right now. At what cost? And the most important thing that I ask my teachers and people who are in touch with me is to be mindful of these lack of social connections, the lack of routine, the lack of familiar relationships that kids have. Uh, and now you're teaching them online. Please be mindful when you're doing an assessment. Please be mindful when you're trying to get the most out of them. It's okay. At the end of the day, we want them to be happy. We want them to be those in a safe space psychologically. If there are some losses in outcomes, I'm okay with it,
Right.
as long as they are fine in terms of, because we are building them to be good human beings, not just to get good jobs, right? And it's really important to for teachers to keep that in mind all the time, because teachers get quickly into teaching mode that, oh, I have to take this assessment next Monday and I have to finish this chapter, let me finish this. Oh, you're not online, why? Call up the parent, why is the child not online? So
Right.
to be more mindful about that. And that's the number one thing. Fatigue, yes, there are different guidelines, 2 hours a day, 3 sessions. 0 to 3 has some guidelines, WHO has some guidelines, but just use some common sense. How long will you like to be online in front of a screen?
Absolutely.
2 3 sessions is fine. Just being mindful of the kids mental space is the most important thing we can do.
Thank you so much, Mr. Patel. I think we need to remember that the student is at the center of this, and mental health, not just mental health, even fulfillment is a goal that we need to aspire to. So, thank you so much, all the panelists. One thing has clearly emerged that a lot of things will need redefining, recalibration, unlearning, relearning. Teacher roles um, are going to be redefined in the sense of what Mr. Patel just said. It's not just about completing a chapter or completing an assessment. It's also being even more watchful about student well-being than we were in the older days when things education was purely physical. It's also becoming very clear that technology uh, is an enabler at most, but it's not the only enabler. Technology is more about content and community building rather than, assuming an all too important role as the only thing that can take us out of or help us create a more effective learning system, a learning model. So hybrid learning, we all agree, is not going to be about one pedagogical tool, but a combination of all, with the teacher's willingness and the teacher's diligence, as Professor Shah says, at the center of it. The decisions that we make now and in the coming weeks and months are going to be pivotal for our students, not just in terms of content delivery, in terms of acquisition of knowledge or pure concepts, acquisition of skills, but also how we are able to maintain a balance between the hard skills, the soft skills, as well as the fulfillment that every student derives, and the sheer joy of learning that we're able to pass on to our students. On this note, I end the panel discussion. I'm extremely grateful to all our panelists, and a warm welcome to all the participants of this faculty development program. I hope together we can make these pivotal decisions and ensure the best for our students. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Avani. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for having us, Avani.
Invitation. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. In just an hour of this panel discussion, we have been given so much to think about, from digital fluency, digital inequity, educational devices as community building ecosystems, from co-teaching to unlearning for relearning. we have been offered a range of ideas that all of us will be deliberating about in the days to come as part of this 1 week international FTP. On behalf of the participants and the organizers, I thank the panelists for such a rich discussion on what needs to be done for the future. With this, we come to the end of the inaugural ceremony of the 1 week international FDP on hybrid teaching modalities, educational strategies during COVID and beyond.